Hello, my dear friends. You are standing on a narrow, reed-choked spit of land in the Winneshiek bottoms of the Mississippi River. The date is November 11th, 1940. The air against your cheeks is startlingly warm, a soft, unseasonable caress that feels more like early September than late autumn. You can smell the damp, sweet decay of the marsh and the faint, metallic scent of your shotgun oil. The water around your boots is still, reflecting a sky that looks hazy and heavy, like a pearl held behind a thin veil of smoke. You hear the distant, lonely whistle of a locomotive, and the occasional, rhythmic splash of a wooden oar dipping into the glass-like surface of the river. It is a perfect day for duck hunting. The birds are moving low and fast, and you have already bagged several, their feathers iridescent and slick in the strange golden light. You feel a sense of profound peace, a quiet holiday contentment that makes the Great War, which this day is meant to remember, feel a world away. But if you look toward the horizon, far to the west, the sky is no longer grey. It is becoming a bruised, terrifying shade of purple, a colour that doesn't belong in nature. The wind, which had been a mere whisper, suddenly dies completely. The silence that follows is not peaceful. It is a vacuum. It is the sound of the atmosphere holding its breath before a scream. We often assume that history's greatest disasters arrive with a drum roll and a clear warning. We imagine that the victim saw the monster coming and simply chose to ignore it. But the Armistice Day Storm didn't play by those rules. It was a predator that wore a mask of mild weather until it was close enough to touch its prey. So, before you get too cozy, take a second to gently tap that new hype button YouTube just added. It really does help little guys like me push through the algorithm. And be sure to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Now get comfortable, let the day melt away, and we will drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. The morning of November 11 began with a deceptive gentleness across much of the American Midwest. In cities like Chicago and Minneapolis, people stepped out of their front doors and were surprised by the warmth. The thermometer in some places climbed into the 60s. Men walked to Armistice Day parades without their heavy overcoats, carrying them over their arms instead. There was a feeling of lightness in the air, a final gift from a fading autumn. It was the kind of weather that invites you to linger outside, to take the long way home, or to push a boat just a little further from the shore. But thousands of feet above these unsuspecting crowds, two massive, invisible giants were racing toward a collision. A surge of moist tropical air from the Gulf of Mexico was surging northward, full of energy and heat. At the same time, a brutal, bone-chilling mass of Arctic air was sliding down from the Canadian Rockies. They met over the plains of Iowa and Minnesota with a violence that defied the primitive weather instruments of the time. The barometric pressure began to drop with a sickening speed, plunging toward record lows. It was as if a giant hand were pressing down on the map, squeezing the air into a frenzy. The storm was not just a weather event. It was a geographic transformation. It was the birth of an inland hurricane. The birth of an inland hurricane was not something the local forecasters could easily track in 1940. The Weather Bureau in Chicago was the regional hub, but it was closed for the holiday. Only a skeleton crew remained, and they were working with data that was already hours old. Teletype machines stuttered out readings from distant stations. But the storm was moving faster than the information. By the time a report of falling pressure reached a desk, the conditions on the ground had already shifted. In the marshlands of the upper Mississippi, the duck hunters were the first to feel the change. The eerie silence you felt just moments ago is suddenly shattered by a sound like a distant freight train. The wind returns, but it is no longer a breeze. It is a cold, sharp blade that shears the tops off the waves. The temperature begins to plummet, falling 40 degrees in a matter of hours. The warm, humid air is literally scoured away by a wall of ice and wind. The rain starts as a light drizzle, but within minutes, it turns into a stinging, horizontal sleet. Then, the snow arrives. It isn't the soft, fluttering flakes of a Christmas card. It is a blinding white chaos that erases the horizon and turns the world into a featureless void. If you are out on the water, your landmarks vanish instantly. The shoreline, which was only 100 yards away, is swallowed by the whiteout. The ducks, sensing the danger, begin to drop from the sky in thousands, seeking shelter in the reeds. The hunters, at first excited by the sudden influx of birds, quickly realize they are in a fight for their lives. Small wooden boats, designed for calm river backwaters, are suddenly tossed like corks. The wind is sustained at 50 miles per hour, with gusts reaching 80 or 90. It is enough to flip a man over or blow a boat right out of the water. Many hunters try to make it back to the mainland, but the wind is too strong to row against. They find themselves stranded on tiny muddy islands as the water levels begin to rise. The storm surge is pushing the river into places it hasn't been in decades. Ice begins to form on their clothing, a heavy, crackling shell that saps the heat from their bodies. Their fingers go numb, making it impossible to strike a match or reload a gun. They are trapped in a nightmare that was a sunny afternoon just 2 hours ago. And they are not alone. While the hunters struggle in the marshes, the Great Lakes are beginning to churn with a terrifying power. Lake Michigan, in particular, is positioned perfectly to catch the full brunt of the southwesterly winds. The lake is an enormous basin of water, and as the wind sweeps across its length, it builds waves of incredible size. By mid-afternoon, the waves are reaching heights of 20 feet, then 30. They are not the rhythmic, predictable swells of the ocean. They are chaotic, steep-sided walls of water that crash into one another from different directions. The ships caught out on the lake are mostly freighters, carrying iron ore, coal, and grain for the winter. These are steel giants, built to withstand the temperamental nature of the inland seas. But the Armistice Day Storm is something beyond their design. The William B. Davok and the Anna C. Minch are two such vessels, moving through the thickening gloom. They are heavy with cargo, sitting low in the water, which makes them vulnerable to the pounding surf. On the bridges of these ships, captains are staring into a wall of white spray and snow. The radar we take for granted today does not exist for them. They are navigating by compass, clock, and the terrifying sound of the wind screaming through the rigging. The engines are straining, turning the propellers with everything they have, but the ships are barely making headway. They're being pushed toward the jagged coastline of the Michigan Panhandle. The crews are huddled below decks, listening to the screech of twisting metal and the thunderous impact of water on the hull. Every time the ship dives into a trough, there is a moment of agonizing suspense. Will it rise again, or will the weight of the water hold it down forever? The lake is no longer a shipping lane. It has become a graveyard in the making. On the shore, people watch as the docks are pulverized by the ice and waves. The power lines go down, plunging coastal towns into a darkness that feels ancient and absolute. The wind is so loud that people have to shout into each other's ears just to be heard inside their own homes. They know their fathers and sons are out there, but there is no way to reach them. The radio is filled with static and the desperate fading signals of ships in distress. And yet the storm is only gaining strength. As evening falls on November 11, the center of the low-pressure system moves directly over Lake Superior. The wind shifts, now coming from the northwest, bringing with it a lethal injection of cold. The rain and sleet have fully transitioned into a blizzard of historic proportions. Inland, the storm is paralyzing the transportation network of the entire Midwest. Trains are being swallowed by drifts of snow that reach the tops of the locomotives. Motorists who are out for a holiday drive find themselves stuck in ditches, their heaters failing as the snow clogs their tailpipes. In Minnesota, the drifts are so high that people are forced to tunnel out of their second-story windows. But the most heartbreaking scenes are still unfolding in the river bottoms. The hunters who couldn't reach the shore have gathered on whatever high ground they can find. On one small island, a group of men huddled together under an overturned boat. They are shivering violently, a sign that their core temperatures are dropping into the danger zone. They try to stay awake, knowing that if they fall asleep in this cold, they will likely never wake up. They talk about their families, about the Thanksgiving dinners they were planning, trying to keep the spark of life flickering. One hunter, a young man barely 20 years old, tries to run in place to keep his blood moving. But the wind knocks him down every time he tries to stand. The spray from the river is freezing instantly on his skin, turning his hair into a crown of ice. He looks out across the white void, hoping to see the lights of a rescue party. But there are no lights. The world has been reduced to the sound of the wind and the feeling of the cold. Back on the lakes, the situation has turned catastrophic. The William B. Davik and the Anna C. Minch have vanished from the radio waves. They have succumbed to the waves, sinking so quickly that not a single distress signal was successfully transmitted. Dozens of sailors are plunged into the freezing water, where survival is measured in minutes. The lake is so violent that even the lifeboats are smashed against the sides of the sinking ships. The scale of the loss is starting to become apparent to the Coast Guard stations, but they are powerless to help. Their own boats cannot leave the harbours without being capsized or driven onto the rocks. Leaving the rocks, leaving the survivors to face the night alone. By midnight, the storm has reached its peak intensity. The wind speeds are now being compared to those of a Category 2 hurricane. In the city of Chicago, the wind is whistling through the skyscrapers, shattering windows and tossing signs like playing cards. But the real horror is in the rural areas where the infrastructure is non-existent. Farmers are waking up to find their barns have been leveled, their livestock frozen where they stood. The sheer speed of the temperature drop is what proves so lethal. It wasn't a gradual cooling. It was a physical blow. Many people were caught in light clothing, never imagining that a 60-degree day could turn into a sub-zero night. In the marshes, the rising water is now threatening to submerge the islands where the hunters are trapped. They have to stand in waist-deep water, holding onto willow trees to keep from being swept away. The water is barely above freezing, and the air is much colder. They are experiencing the limits of human endurance. Some men begin to hallucinate, seeing the lights of their homes in the distance, or hearing the voices of loved ones. They reach out into the dark, only to find the cold sting of the snow. One father is holding his teenage son close to his chest, trying to share what little warmth he has left. He tells the boy stories, anything to keep him focused, to keep him breathing. He describes the smell of wood smoke and the taste of hot coffee. He promises him that they will be home by morning, but as the hours tick by, the boy's responses become slower, his breathing more shallow. The father feels a desperate, helpless rage at the sky. How could a day that started so beautifully turn into this? It feels like a betrayal by the earth itself. Out on Lake Michigan, another ship, the Novadoc, has run aground on a sandbar near Pentwater. The ship is breaking apart under the pounding of the waves. The crew has retreated to the highest point of the vessel, the pilot house. They are trapped there, watching as the rest of their ship is swallowed by the lake. They can see the lights of the shore, so close they can almost touch them. But between them and safety lies a half-mile of churning, lethal water. that no boat can navigate. The men on the Novadoc are shivering in the dark, their clothes soaked through. They have no heat, no food, and very little hope. They watch as the lifeboats of the Coast Guard try repeatedly to reach them. Each time, the small rescue craft are beaten back by the waves, nearly capsizing. The people on the shore have gathered, building large bonfires to show the sailors they haven't been forgotten. But the firelight only serves to highlight the violence of the lake. The waves are hitting the Novadoc with such force that the entire steel structure shudders and groans. The men inside the pilot house brace themselves with every impact, wondering if this will be the one that snaps the ship in two. Two of their crewmates have already been washed overboard, disappearing into the black water in an instant. The survivors are forced to watch, unable to do anything but hold on. Meanwhile, across the region, the death toll is rising in ways no one expected. In the orchards of Michigan and Illinois, the storm is killing millions of fruit trees. The sap was still up in the trunks because of the warm autumn, and when the temperature dropped, it froze and expanded. The trees literally exploded, their bark splitting with sounds like pistol shots. It was a massacre of the landscape, a reminder that the storm's reach extended far beyond human lives. By the morning of November 12, the wind begins to lose some of its fury, but the damage is done. As the sun rises over a world buried in white, the rescue efforts begin in earnest. Pilots in small planes take to the air, flying low over the river bottoms and the lake shores. They are looking for signs of life in a landscape that looks like the surface of the moon. They see the bodies of hunters frozen in their blinds, still clutching their guns. They see men waving tattered pieces of clothing from the tops of trees or the roofs of cabins. The pilots begin to drop supplies, bread, blankets, and cans of hot soup wrapped in insulation. It is a desperate, improvised lifeline. But for many, the help comes too late. The transition from the chaos of the storm to the cold silence of the aftermath is jarring. The sky is a clear, cold blue, as if apologizing for the violence of the night before. But the survivors are not in a forgiving mood. As they begin the grim task of counting the cost. In the Mississippi River bottoms, the rescue boats move through the ice-choked channels. They find groups of hunters who survive by huddling together for warmth, their bodies intertwined in a desperate knot. They find others who didn't make it, frozen into the ice like statues. The stories of survival are as harrowing as the stories of loss. One man survived by burying himself in a pile of dead ducks, using their feathers and bodies for insulation. Another survived by constantly moving, walking in small circles for 18 hours straight until the sun came up. The trauma of the night is etched into their faces, a look of hollow-eyed shock that will never quite leave them. In the small towns along the river, the local gymnasiums are turned into makeshift morgues and hospitals. Families wait in line, hoping for news of a father, a brother, or a son. The atmosphere is thick with a heavy, suffocating grief. On the Great Lakes, the wreckage of the storm is beginning to wash ashore. Debris from the Davok and the Minch is found scattered along miles of coastline. Life belts, broken furniture, and pieces of the wooden decks are found tangled in the beach grass. Then, the bodies begin to appear. They are found wearing heavy coats and boots, some still clutching bits of wreckage. The sheer power of the lake is evident in the state of the remains. The steel hulls of the sunken ships will not be found for years, resting in the cold, dark depths of the lake floor. The Novadoc crew is finally rescued after 2 days of being stranded on the breaking ship. A local fishing boat, the Three Brothers, manages to reach them when the Coast Guard could not. The fishermen took a massive risk, navigating through the still dangerous swells to pull the shivering men to safety. It is a rare moment of triumph in a week defined by tragedy. But even as the survivors are brought home, the questions begin to emerge. How could this have happened? Why was the warning so late? Or in some cases, non-existent? The public's anger begins to focus on the Weather Bureau and its outdated methods. The Armistice Day Storm was a wake-up call that the world could no longer ignore. It was the moment when the unpredictability of the weather was recognized as a national security issue. Forcing a complete overhaul of the system. The aftermath of the storm saw a flurry of activity in Washington, D.C. The Weather Bureau was criticized for its rigid hours and its failure to anticipate the speed of the storm's development. As a result, the Bureau was moved from the Department of Agriculture to the Department of Commerce. New regulations were put in place, requiring weather stations to be manned 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The regional office for the Midwest was moved from Chicago to Minneapolis to be closer to the center of weather activity. More importantly, the way forecasts were communicated to the public began to change. The Bureau realized that a forecast is useless if it doesn't reach the people in time to make a difference. The development of more sophisticated radio networks and, eventually, the use of radar can be traced back to the lessons of 1940. But for the families who lost loved ones, these systemic changes were small comfort. The storm had claimed over 150 lives across the region. Nearly half of those deaths were the duck hunters in the Mississippi River bottoms. They were mostly young men, in the prime of their lives, who had gone out for a day of sport and never returned. The loss of so many men in such a short time left a permanent scar on the communities of the upper Midwest. In towns like Winona and La Crosse, the anniversary of the storm is still marked with quiet ceremonies. They remember not just the event, but the individuals. The storm also had a profound impact on the ecology of the region. The loss of millions of trees changed the landscape of the Midwest for a generation. The apple industry in Iowa was virtually wiped out, and many farmers simply gave up and moved to the cities. The storm was a reminder that even in the modern age, nature has the power to reshape human society in an instant. It reinforced the idea that the Great Lakes are not just bodies of water, but powerful entities that demand constant vigilance. The legend of the gales of November became a part of the local folklore, immortalized in songs and stories. But beneath the legend lies the cold, hard reality of what happened on that Monday in 1940. It was a day when the sky betrayed the land, and the land was left to pick up the pieces. As the years passed, the physical evidence of the storm faded. The wrecked ships were covered by the shifting sands of the lake bed. The fallen trees were cleared away or rotted into the soil. The fallen trees were cleared away or rotted into the soil, but the psychological memory of the storm remained remarkably vivid. For those who lived through it, the Armistice Day Storm became a chronological marker. Life was divided into before the storm and after the storm. Grandparents would tell their grandchildren about the day the mercury dropped like a stone and the world turned white. They would describe the sound of the wind, a sound that they claimed they could still hear on particularly cold nights. The story of the storm became a cautionary tale, passed down through generations of outdoorsmen and sailors. It taught a hard lesson about the importance of respecting the signs of the sky, even when they seem subtle. It taught that a clear morning is no guarantee of a safe evening. In the decades that followed, technology continued to close the gaps that the storm had exposed. Satellite imagery now allows us to track systems from the moment they form over the oceans. Computer models can predict the path and intensity of a storm with incredible accuracy, days in advance. We live in a world of constant, real-time information, where a warning can reach millions of people in seconds. It is easy to feel a sense of safety, a belief that we have finally tamed the weather. But history has a way of reminding us that our control is often an illusion. Even with all our technology, a sudden shift in the atmosphere can still catch us off guard. The Armistice Day Storm reminds us that the environment is not a static backdrop to our lives. It is a dynamic, powerful force that can change the rules of our existence without notice. When we look back at the hunters in the marshes or the sailors on the lake, we shouldn't see them as foolish or unprepared. We should see them as people who were operating under the assumptions of their time. They were using the best information they had, but the information was simply not enough. Their struggle is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of overwhelming odds. It is also a reminder of the fragility of our modern comforts. We are only a few degrees of temperature and a few miles per hour of wind away from a crisis. The silence of the marsh after the storm is a silence that still speaks to us today. It tells us to watch the horizon, to listen to the wind, and to never take a calm day for granted. The ghosts of 1940 are still there, drifting through the reeds and the waves. The ghosts of 1940 are still there, drifting through the reeds and the waves, waiting for the next time the sky decides to turn. If you were to visit the shores of Lake Michigan today, you might find a quiet, sandy beach where the sun shines brightly. You might see families playing in the surf or sailboats drifting lazily on the horizon. It is hard to imagine that this same water once rose up in 30-foot walls to swallow massive ships. It is hard to imagine the screaming wind and the blinding snow that once turned this peaceful place into a scene of carnage. But if you walk along the shore after a big storm, you might find a piece of smoothed-over wood or a rusted bit of iron. These are the fragments of the past, the physical echoes of the Armistice Day Storm. They are reminders that the history of a place is not just written in books, but in the landscape itself. The storm changed the way we interact with the natural world, forcing us to build better systems of protection. It led to the creation of the modern National Weather Service, an organization that saves countless lives every year. It pushed us to develop better communication networks and more robust infrastructure. But it also left us with a sense of humility. We realized that no matter how much we learn, there will always be elements of the world that are beyond our control. There is a certain beauty in that realization, a recognition of our place in the grander scheme of things. It connects us to the people of 1940 who stood on the same ground and looked at the same sky. They experienced the same awe and the same fear that we feel when we encounter the power of nature. Their story is our story, a part of the long, complicated relationship between humanity and the earth. As we look back on that fateful day, we can honor the memory of those who were lost by remaining vigilant. We can appreciate the technology that keeps us safe, while also acknowledging its limitations. We can listen to the stories of the survivors and learn from their courage and their loss. And we can take a moment to look at the sky today, whatever it looks like where you are. Whether it is a clear blue or a heavy grey, remember that it is always changing. It is a living, breathing thing that demands our attention and our respect. The Armistice Day Storm was a moment when the sky spoke and the world was forced to listen. It is a conversation that continues to this day, in the quiet corners of the past and the busy streets of the present. It is a conversation that continues to this day, in the quiet corners of the past and the busy streets of the present, shaping our future. The cultural impact of the storm also extended into the arts and literature of the Midwest. Writers and poets found in the storm a powerful metaphor for the suddenness of change and the vulnerability of life. They wrote about the white death that swept across the plains and the hungry lakes that took their toll. These stories helped to process the collective trauma of the region, providing a way to talk about the unspeakable. They turned a weather event into a legend, a piece of regional identity that is still felt today. Even now, in the era of social media and digital news, the story of the Armistice Day Storm continues to resonate. Every time a major storm approaches, the old newsreels and photographs are brought out again. They serve as a benchmark, a way to measure the severity of the current threat against the ghosts of the past. They remind us that as much as things have changed, the fundamental challenges of living in a volatile climate remain the same. The storm also reminds us of the importance of community in the face of disaster. The stories of neighbors helping neighbors and strangers risking their lives for one another are the silver lining of the tragedy. The fishing boat that rescued the Novodok crew is just one example of the countless acts of bravery that occurred. In the darkness and the cold, people found a way to reach out to one another, to provide comfort and hope. This sense of shared responsibility is a core part of the Midwestern character, forged in the fires of events like this. It is a reminder that we are at our best when we are looking out for each other. As the sun begins to set on our exploration of this quiet corner of history, let the weight of the day melt away. Think about the people who stood in those marshes or on those shifting decks and feel a connection to their strength. Think about the lessons they learned and how those lessons have made our lives safer and more predictable. But also hold on to that sense of wonder, that recognition of the vast, untamed power of the world around us. History is not just a collection of dates and facts. It is a living, breathing tapestry of human experience. It is a source of wisdom, of inspiration, and sometimes of profound sadness. By drifting back into these quiet corners, we gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and our world. We see the threads that connect us to the past and the patterns that shape our future. The Armistice Day Storm is a single thread in that tapestry, but it is one that glows with a particular intensity. It is a story of a day when the world changed, and of the people who were there to witness it. It is a story of a day when the world changed, and of the people who were there to witness it, leaving a legacy that still breathes. Think for a moment about the silence that returned to the Great Lakes after the winds finally died down. The water, once a chaotic mass of foam and fury, eventually settled back into its basin. The snow, which had been a blinding wall, became a soft, white blanket covering the scars of the land. But beneath that stillness, everything was different. The families who had spent the night in terror were now facing a new reality of loss. The recovery process was slow and painful as communities worked to clear the roads and find the missing. In the spring, when the ice finally melted, more evidence of the storm's violence was revealed. The bodies of sailors who had been lost at sea were sometimes found miles from where their ships went down. The debris of the storm continued to wash up on the beaches for years, a persistent reminder of that November night. But even as the physical reminders faded, the lessons of the storm became more deeply ingrained in the local culture. People learned to read the sky with a new kind of intensity. They learned that a sudden drop in pressure was not just a technical reading, but a warning of potential catastrophe. They learned to prepare for the worst, even when the weather seemed at its best. This cultural memory is a form of protection, a way for a community to pass on vital knowledge to the next generation. It is why even today, people in the Midwest take winter storm warnings so seriously. They know that the quiet corners of the past are not as far away as they seem. The Armistice Day Storm also highlighted the limitations of our scientific understanding at the time. It pushed researchers to look more closely at the interaction between different air masses. It led to a better understanding of the cyclogenesis that creates such powerful inland storms. In a way, the storm was a catalyst for the advancement of meteorology as a serious scientific discipline. It turned the weather from a mysterious, unpredictable force into something that could be studied, modeled, and understood. Of course, understanding is not the same as control. We can predict a storm's path, but we cannot stop it from coming. We can build stronger ships, but we cannot guarantee they will survive a direct hit from a historic wave. This tension between our knowledge and the raw power of nature is at the heart of the human experience. It is what makes stories like the Armistice Day Storm so compelling and so haunting. They remind us that we are part of a world that is much larger and more powerful than we are. They remind us that we are parts of a world that is much larger and more powerful than we are, and that our survival depends on our ability to adapt. As we continue to navigate a changing climate, the lessons of 1940 are more relevant than ever. We are seeing more frequent and more intense weather events across the globe. The once-in-a-century storms are happening more often, challenging our infrastructure and our assumptions. The story of the Armistice Day Storm reminds us that we need to be prepared for the unexpected. It reminds us that our systems of warning and communication must be robust and accessible to everyone. But it also reminds us of the importance of personal responsibility and situational awareness. Just as the hunters in the marshes had to make split-second decisions for their survival, we too must be prepared to act. We must learn to recognize the signs of danger in our own environments and take them seriously. But beyond the practical lessons, there is also a deeper, more spiritual lesson to be found in this story. It is a lesson about the fleeting nature of life and the importance of cherishing the moments we have. The people who went out on that November morning didn't know would be their last day. They were simply living their lives, enjoying a holiday and looking forward to the future. Their story is a reminder to appreciate the warmth of a sunlit room, the comfort of a soft blanket, and the company of our loved ones. It is a reminder to slow down and listen to the world around us, to notice the small changes in the air and the sky. In our fast-paced digital world, it is easy to become disconnected from the natural rhythms of the earth. We live in climate-controlled buildings and look at screens instead of horizons. But the storm of 1940 reminds us that we are still connected to those rhythms, whether we realize it or not. By looking back at these historical events, we can reconnect with that sense of place and that sense of history. We can find a measure of peace in the continuity of the human experience, even in the face of tragedy. The Armistice Day Storm is a part of our shared heritage, a story that belongs to all of us. It is a story of resilience, of loss, and of the enduring power of the natural world. As we move toward the end of our journey tonight, let the echoes of the storm fade into the background. Let the quiet of the present moment take over, and feel a sense of gratitude for the safety and comfort you enjoy. The world is a vast and mysterious place, and we are just a small part of it. But in these quiet moments of reflection, we can find a sense of belonging and a sense of purpose. Anchored in the stories of those who came before. The survivors of the Armistice Day Storm often spoke of a strange kind of clarity that came to them in the midst of the chaos, when everything else was stripped away, the wind, the snow, the freezing water. They were left with the most basic human instincts. They realized what truly mattered to them, and what they were willing to fight for. This clarity is a gift, albeit a hard-won one, that can only be found in the most difficult of circumstances. It is a reminder that we are capable of much more than we think, and that the human spirit is remarkably resilient. The storm of 1940 did not just break things, it also revealed things. It revealed the hidden strengths of individuals and the deep bonds of community. It showed that even in the darkest of times, there is still a light that can be found in the acts of kindness and courage. As we drift further back into the quiet corners of the past, we carry these lessons with us. We see the faces of the hunters and the sailors, not as victims, but as people who faced an extraordinary challenge with whatever strength they had. We see the people on the shore, building their fires and waiting for news, as symbols of our collective hope. Their story is not just a tragedy, it is a testament to the human condition. It is a story that deserves to be remembered, not just for the loss of life, but for the lessons it continues to teach us. The Great Lakes are still there, vast and powerful, a reminder of the storm's potential to return. The Mississippi River bottoms still flood and freeze, a reminder of the fragility of the land. But we are different now, better equipped and more aware because of the people of 1940. Their sacrifice was not in vain, as it led to a world that is safer for all of us. As the night deepens and the world around you grows even quieter, let yourself feel a sense of peace. The storm has passed, and the stars are out, shining down on a world that has been shaped by the events of the past. You are part of that world, a part of that ongoing story. You carry the memories of the past within you, a source of wisdom and strength for the future. The quiet corners of history are always there, waiting for us to explore them and learn from them. They are places of reflection and renewal, where we can find a deeper understanding of our place in the world. As we reach the final part of our journey tonight, let the spirit of the past guide you toward a restful sleep. Know that you are safe and that the world is in good hands. Know that you are safe and that the world is in good hands. watched over by the lessons of history and the care of those around you. The Armistice Day Storm has become a part of the quiet architecture of our collective memory. It is a story that is told in whispers on cold nights and in the solemn pages of history books. It is a reminder of a day when the ordinary was transformed into the extraordinary, and the human spirit was tested to its limit. As you settle into the final moments of this journey, imagine the world of 1940 slowly fading away. The sound of the wind is replaced by the soft hum of your own room. The cold sting of the snow is replaced by the warmth of your blankets. The fear and the chaos of the storm are replaced by a sense of calm and security. The people we have met along the way, the hunters, the sailors, the families on the shore, are now at peace. Their stories have been told, and their memories honored. They are part of the long, quiet history of the Midwest, a history that is written in the water and the land. As you drift off into a deep and restful sleep, carry with you the resilience and the hope that they represented. Remember that even the most powerful storm eventually passes, leaving behind a world that is renewed and transformed. Remember that we are never truly alone, as we are connected to the past and to each other through the stories we share. The quiet corners of the past are always there, a source of comfort and inspiration for those who seek them. So, let the day melt away completely now. Let your thoughts grow soft and slow, like the falling snow after the wind has died down. Feel the weight of your body as you settle into your bed, and let go of any remaining tension. You have traveled far tonight, through the winds and the waves of a historic storm. You have seen the best and the worst of what nature and humanity can offer, and now it is time to rest. The world is quiet, the story is finished, and the night is yours. Sleep well, my dear friends, and may your dreams be filled with the peace and the beauty of a calm horizon. We will drift back together again soon, into another quiet corner of the past. Until then, stay warm, stay safe, and let the quietness guide you home.